Fire Radio.
Hey everyone, Jeremy, National Fire Radio. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, joining me, Preston Lyons. What is up, my man? How are you?
Oh, man, loving it, loving life. Thank you so much, and I'm honored and humbled to be on the platform. Thank you so much for having me.
Bro, it's just two brothers having a conversation. That's all this show is, and that's all it's ever going to be, at least to me. But I do want to say a couple things. Preston, you are responsible for the Relentless Rejects Podcast. Super cool. You got about 20 episodes or more in the pipe now?
20 next week. I just posted 19 today.
Awesome. Congratulations. The first 10 is always the biggest challenge. And I want to go down that road with you. But I think what's really cool about it is, like, a lot of what I get to do is I get to watch. I get to see what's happening in the fire service. I get to meet people from all different walks. And when you have a show like this, like the podcast that I do, I get to make the rules. And so I get to talk to whoever I want. What's fun is today's episode that got released was David Rhodes, the editor-in-chief of Fire Engineering Magazine. And that position, to me, is one of the most important jobs in the American Fire Service. And he was on the podcast, and that episode dropped today. And here we are chatting with Preston Lyons, who's got 20 episodes in on the Relentless Rejects podcast. So I get to write the rules and have whoever I want on, because I like to have conversation with everyone. I think everybody's got a story or something to share that can make the fire service better, especially if they're putting themselves out there. And brother, I've caught some of your content, and I reached out to you. I sent you a message, and I was just like, hey man, really like what you're doing. It's young, it's fresh, it's new. There's been a lot of new podcasts popping up across the channels over the last year or two. It's fun to watch, but the commitment and longevity that has to go into it is over the top. And a lot of people that get started don't realize the commitment that it takes to do this on a regular, on a regularity. So, for me, it's fun to watch you put up 20 episodes. And I think there's some longevity here. And so I just wanted to have you on. I wanted to hear all about it so that in 4 years, when you take the torch and move on and blow this thing up into a massive podcast, spewing the good word of the National Fire Radio or National Fire Service, like, it's you, brother. And so I wanted to capture you early on, and that's what this is all about. So thanks for joining me, man. A long-winded intro to have you on.
No, yeah, and obviously long-winded intro, but I don't deserve really any of it. It happened organically. It just happened from, being a passionate firefighter that wants to network and, like you, have conversations with everybody inside the fire service. And that's where I think we're missing that a little bit in society, is just being able to sit back and have conversations, agree to disagree, or just have like-minded individuals come together. And that's what I love about, Firefighter Podcast today.
Yeah, but what makes you the guy that has the conversation? Like, and what I mean by that, and I mean that so endearingly, is like you're willing to put yourself out there and be a steward of the word. And that takes on a whole new persona instead of just going to conferences and meeting up with guys or sending a guy a DM and say, hey, I really like your Instagram, or I like your post, or I like your class that I took. There's so much more to it than just that.
I've reflected on this, thinking about, why me? Yeah. Trying to fight that imposter syndrome and, who am I to do this? But, I think it really does go back to my upbringing as a kid. My parents lived in different states. I was in and out of different schools. I lived in Colorado for some time. I lived in California for some time. So I was constantly starting over and having to make new friendships and build new relationships like every year. I didn't, I hate to say that I don't have a lot of long-lasting friendships from school, but I think what that helped develop in me is getting over a fear of talking to complete strangers and public speaking. I don't have it mastered yet, but I learned early on that, just go out and form relationships. It's not a big deal. And I learned that early on. And I know public speaking for a lot of people is like one of the biggest fears in the world. And I had an innate, skill of just being okay with standing in front of a crowd and talking. So putting a camera in my face and just letting me run with it hasn't really been an issue.
I love that. There's so much there, right? Public speaking, in my eyes, I think everybody needs to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And obviously we talk about that in the fire service, but I'm just talking about in life. Like, I'm a firm believer that every kid should work in the service industry. Every kid should have to be a waiter or or a waitress, right? Or work in some type of service-oriented industry where you're dealing with public and being thrusted into a responsibility to provide a service. Now, obviously, the fire service is, but we can hide there, right? Only one guy has to have conversation on EMS call. Only one guy has to talk to the homeowner after a fire, right? But I'm talking about where the individual gets held accountable for making conversation, making small talk, answering to people, being polite, all those things that go into it. And that's a part of public speaking. You have to get comfortable in that persona. And so how else better to challenge yourself to do that than to do exactly what you're doing? I freaking love it.
Yeah, it's also how I ran into developing the podcast, because it wasn't initially my ambition going off, because, you know, Corley Moore is a mentor of mine and I idolize what he's doing with the scrap. And Jeremy, you're just a master behind the mic, and I'm not trying to toot your horn, but it's one of those things where it's like, again, like, who am I to do this? Really, what I started doing was recording myself talking about things I wanted to present on. I have a goal of being like a Scott Thompson in the future, standing up on stage and Frank Viscuso giving these inspirational lectures to the masses. And I thought this was a good place to start. I'm going to start recording my conversations, basically talking to no one. Yeah. And I was posting it and like sending it to a couple people and saying, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And more often, I didn't think anybody was really going to watch it or give me any feedback, but so many people said, you know, this is great, but honestly, it'd be great if you had someone else come on and give different viewpoints and tell different stories of their career. And then someone finally said, you're eventually going to run out of shit to talk about. You can only talk about yourself so much. So why don't you create a platform to bring on like-minded individuals and people in the fire service to tell their story? And I said, I'll do it. That's fine with me. And
Cool.
Without my wife's permission, I bought a bunch of podcasting equipment.
That's usually how it works, man.
Yeah, and here we go. And then, you know, Corley, speaking on 20 episodes, Corley normally tells people that want to get him on the podcast, like, hey, get to episode 20. Because you said episode 10, his mind, episode 20 means you've put in the work, you've established it, you've shared it amongst the masses, you know, and I'm happy to say he's coming on in October.
That's great. I mean, Corley is he's a good friend. You know, what's really fun is, you know, in my interactions with him and, you know, a lot of laughter and storytelling with him, you know, he credits, I guess, National Fire Radio with pushing him to get started, which is pretty cool. And, you know, which kind of, you know, I don't know, been doing this 5-6 years now and kind of figuring it all out. And I'm still figuring it out every single day. I think the biggest part of it and one of the biggest challenges is just taking the leap. I say hit record. It is very hard some days to hit record.
Yeah, and like I said, for some reason, I didn't have that issue, but I would say before any of it, it was my content creation on Instagram, right? I was having fun with it. You know, you see like these random firefighter reels on there with music in the background and chopped, and it would switch scenes on different beats of a song, and I was like, I could do that. And the only reason why I really started taking the leap with that is because I was helping out our PIO promote my department, because I'm someone that's, you know, I want to be a part of an organization that's pretty awesome. And in this day and age, the best way to get your message, your platform, your department's name out there is the free advertisement of social media. And so my PIO, she's older, wasn't very savvy with the technology. So I was like, hey, if you give me permission, I'll cut some videos for you, write a caption and send it to you so you can post it, just to get our department's name out there, because there's a lot of young firefighters that were like, our stuff is so bland, it's so dull, it's terrible. And I'm like, well, we can sit here and bitch about it, or we can step up and help, right? I don't need to get paid for it.
Yeah, no, listen, man, the only way we're going to make a difference is if we get involved and if we start pushing forward, right? And some of that comes at our own expense. But here's the deal, and this is always the fun conversation. It's, you could always turn a blind eye and walk away from it, but then you're still a part of it, though, right? Like, if you're not happy with your fire company, you're not happy with your company, your department, you don't like what they do, if you remove yourself from the equation, you're still affiliated with them and you're unhappy.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, like training. Oh, you're going to go on your own time and spend your own dime. Well, if I enjoy it, like if I wanted to go away fishing for the weekend because it was something that I truly enjoyed, I'm going to spend the money to go away and shoulder the expense of that. What's the difference if I enjoy firefighting and I want to go away for the weekend and shoulder the cost on that? It's only going to better me personally. It's going to better my company. It's also going to better our department, but more importantly, the people that we serve. Why is that being vilified? Why is that an issue? It should not be. And so the only way we progress is being involved, getting involved.
Yeah, I don't know why it's almost like a cardinal sin in the fire service to geek out on this stuff, right? To go to conferences, to listen to the podcast. I feel like a large part of the fire service, I was told when I first got into my organization, they're like, hey, look, we run 4896. They're like, work your 48, but when you're off shift, don't even check your email. Don't answer your phone. Go do whatever makes you happy and disconnect, because that's good for your own mental health and well-being, which I think resonates with a lot of people, right? You don't want to, especially some of the calls we run, you don't want to, find yourself in a dark place. But I think like yourself and for me that I discovered was I have to go into this 100% because some of us just have this innate sense of duty, this service that like we are fulfilled by mastering our craft and surrounding ourselves with like-minded individuals and building a tribe in this career, in this profession. And that's where I get my fulfillment. And that's why I pay out of pocket to go to conferences. And that's why I have the podcast and I love bringing people on, because that's what keeps me whole.
Makes sense. I mean, it just makes sense. And so what's exciting then for me is like I'm sitting here listening to you and I love it all. And you can feel that passion and it just makes sense why you are where you are. So I want to ask you this, the Relentless Rejects, honor over everything. A couple things I read. Relentless students of the craft, constant rejection of mediocrity, honor over everything. Those core 3 tenets or principles of what you stand for. How long did it take you to formulate those and to understand how important those are to you?
It took a lot of reflection and just journaling. I would beat my head against the wall trying to influence culture and leadership and change. I've been doing it basically since I got into my own department. I'm a big Jocko guy. His book, Extreme Ownership, came out around the same time I got into the fire service, and I dove into that head first, right? Just everything, taking ownership of everything is extremely hard, but it's fulfilling. And I got a lot of pushback from just being someone that cared about leadership and accountability. We spoke a little bit about that before we hit record. The best example I can make, it's probably not the best one for talking about the fire service, is alcohol, right? Beers. When, let's say you go out with a group of guys and you're like, hey, look, I'm not drinking. I'm not a drinker. I'm not drinking right now. The reaction you get from people that are like, oh my God, like what, you don't drink? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you pregnant? It's like, yeah, right. Hey, no, I'm just going down this path. I'm just trying to live a cleaner lifestyle, live a better life, but the backlash you get from it, and people are literally like, hey, when you start drinking again, call me, but I don't want to hang out with you until you're drinking. And I think it's the same thing in the fire service. When you come back from a conference and you're like, hey, look, I learned some really cool stuff and I got inspired by a lot of these people. I would love to talk about aggressive firefighting tactics or searching without a hose line or something like that. People are like, nah, man, like, hey, pickleball courts up, bro. Like we're not into that nerdy stuff. Like we don't care. We run more EMS than we run fire anyways, so we don't need to learn all that stuff. The training division is going to teach us our quarterly trainings, and that's all I need to know to fill my job description. So anything above that, it's too much work, too much time for me. I don't want to participate. Call me when you want to play pickleball.
I do like pickleball. Not gonna lie. But I will say this, right? There's a lot there, and I think what's important though is how we approach that. There can be a lot of standoffness that can happen when a guy like yourself that is all in comes back And you have to be careful about the chest pounding and how you can sell what you just learned, because those guys didn't go with you because they didn't want to. And you have to bring back what you learned and try to install some of that. Try to incorporate other people to come over and understand that there is a different way to try something or do something, or to share some of your knowledge or wisdom that you might have learned a weekend away. But it has to be done in a correct way. And you can't push too hard, too fast, because you will be ostracized and pushed to the side as the weirdo, But when you know how to broker the conversation, when you know how to sell I've talked about this on the podcast, being a salesman, like you need a guy that knows how to play against the room with different types of personalities. And you can take those guys off the pickleball court for 10 more minutes, take them off the court, and be able to give them something that you just educated yourself on. I think there's an ability to do that. How you do it is everything. It's all about the approach.
I actually wrote an article on that in Firefighter Nation. So I'm speaking everything I talk about, I've learned through my own mistakes, my own journey. I very rarely take anything from anybody else because it's not something I can relate to. For me, my first conference, and we may get into it later, but I had my eyes opened. I like to say that I'm a reborn again firefighter because it motivated me to want to learn more. It made me realize that the fire service, the brotherhood, is bigger than what I had anticipated it to be. And you've heard that when people get outside the walls of their organization, they're like, oh my gosh, and I try to fire hose people in the face of like, you need to go to the conference. We need to do this. We need to change this. We need to rewrite all of our SOPs. And if you don't get on board with it, you're a mutt. Right. Like what? I did stuff like that. And I was even putting it on social media, and I wasn't calling anybody out, but I would say something in my caption. It was like, if your crew's on the recliners and they're being mutts, ignore them and keep getting after it. And I'm like, I am not making any friends. This is terrible. And then also what I found myself doing was saying, hey, hats off to guys like Mike Champo, but I would come back and say, hey, I learned this from Mike Champo, or I learned this from Eric Wheaton and I'm name dropping, which doesn't really hold any weight for guys that don't even know who those people are.
Correct.
And so what I realized was I need to incorporate what I learned into my own skill set, and then just show people how I do things maybe a little bit different, masking up with gloves on, doing search techniques or drags and carries, and then catch the attention of people saying like, hey, I really like how you did that. How'd you learn that? Like, allow it to organically happen instead of me trying to ram it down the throat of people in my organization. And that, like you said, that's how you get the pushback.
Yeah, and more importantly, the buy-in.
Yes. Yeah.
We got to get the buy-in, right? And it's like not everyone is going to be able to subscribe to what what you're selling. And you have to figure that out is dynamic. You said something that really is interesting to me. Reborn, again, firefighter. Mm-hmm. There is so much to that. I guess I would fall into that category, too, in a way. I was that young kid with an ego and big head who knew everything, and you couldn't tell me anything different. And so it took me a little while, or a long while, to figure it all out, and to hold yourself accountable, to be able to look in the mirror every day and hold that look. Everybody can look in the mirror when they're brushing their teeth because you're done in 2 minutes, right? It's, can you stand in front of that mirror all day long and look at yourself, right? That's the thing, and that's where the accountability comes in. Not everybody can do it. And I think what's important is for you to launch a podcast where you're putting yourself out there. There's just an innate accountability that holds you true to what you're doing. And I love that.
And that's where the mantra or the pillar of the Relentless Rejects, honor over everything, comes into play. If it doesn't, because obviously you can be rejected by the status quo of the fire service when you when you put yourself out there, you put that target on your back, whether it's Instagram page, whether it's a podcast, whether it's public speaking or teaching at a Fool's chapter, you're gonna catch a few arrows, right? People for some reason, the crabs in the bucket don't want to see you rise. They don't want to see you doing things exceptionally well above what they're doing for whatever reason. I'm not going to say it's jealousy or hatred or anything like that, because people have their reasons, and I'm not going to define why they would do it, but I experienced it. And I think the journey was stepping out of the status quo myself and becoming or stepping into the journey that I'm on today of trying to be better all the time. And every single day is a struggle, but that's where the honor over everything comes into play. As long as I'm doing things that are honorable and in line with being in this profession and serving a higher purpose and honoring the oath that I took, that gives me the courage to stare at myself in the mirror.
I love it.
Right? If I got people in my department that aren't on board with the stuff that I'm doing, that's perfectly fine. But if I can go back home, or if I can look in the mirror and I'm like, you're doing things that are bettering yourself and the people around you, and if you can live with that, I'm perfectly okay with that. And
you're in a really cool spot right now. 10 years in on your career, you know, in a career fire department, and you're just north of Denver. You're in a really interesting space because 10 years in is like enough to know, but also to understand that there's a long game ahead.
Yes. And, let's retouch on the Reborn again firefighter journey.
Yes.
So, I got hired on by my department in 2015. I was in the United States military for 10 years before that. I graduated high school in 2003, and the high schools were recruiting. The recruiters were hitting the high schools pretty hard to join the military. So I didn't necessarily want to be a firefighter as a kid. I know you have that kind of journey, but
sure.
For me, I thought it was sports, right? I thought I was going to get a scholarship to go to college, and then I'll figure it out after that. But once I hit 17, 18 years old, I realized that wasn't going to be an option for me. And so the military, you know, I hate to say it, but 9/11 kind of saved my life. I don't know where I would be if 9/11 didn't happen and we went to war, because they needed young men to step into those roles. And that's how I ended up in the United States Navy. I started doing some basic firefighting skills because everybody in the Navy has to learn how to manage hose and put out a fire, because there's no one else coming to save you when you're doing shipboard firefighting. And so at 10 years, right, you can retire at 20 in the military, but that was a time where I was like, okay, I'm at the halfway point. I either get out now or I stay in for another 10 and retire. Well, I was like, well, I got some basic firefighting skills. Maybe I'll go try my hand at that. And so that's how I ended up in the fire service. So really, I was that guy. I was just like a lot of firefighters you run into. I wanted the schedule, I wanted the benefits, and I wanted the pay, and I wanted the recognition. You know, when you want to go to a grocery store, little kids are waving at me, and I'm like, this is cool. This is a respectful profession. I could be okay here.
How did you, before we even get to there, I want to talk about the Navy real quick. You know, you talked about September 11th. How old were you when you went into the Navy?
I was 18, right out of high school.
So 18. So out of high school, and you were just seeking direction. Was the Navy something that was, you know, in front of you, or it was just momentary?
So I'm almost ashamed to tell this story, but I hated school. I wasn't doing very well in school.
Yeah.
And the Navy came in and they said, hey, we're doing this thing called an ASVAB test. And you miss the first half of the day of classes, and you just got to take the test. You don't have to pay for it. And I'm like, I can miss half the day of school, and that's it. Like, okay, I'll go in and take this test. I didn't study for it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even know what was going to happen afterwards. I just took this test, and I scored the bare minimum required to get into the military. And so they sat me down. They're like, here's your score. Here's what you're qualified for. And initially I wanted to go to the Marines. But my grandmother said, no, you are not going to the Marines, especially with everything going on in Afghanistan.
At that time, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
so I said, okay, how about the Navy? And she was okay with the Navy. So that's how I ended up in the military.
Yeah, but, you know, I kind of love it because, you know, school's not for everybody. A lot of kids are faced with having to make decisions based upon what their future is going to be, and who the hell knows at 18 years old what it looks like. And for you to go all in, I mean, in deciding to go into the military is an all-in situation because you don't have a choice once you go. And I just there's some beauty in that. It kind of makes sense to me in a way, right? Listening to your story and understanding how you got to the fire service and the exposure to it through the Navy, and then getting there and looking for something a little bit more. You talked about kids recognizing you when you wear the badge or the T-shirt. Like, there is something to that. And I think everybody finds their way. And something like the Navy, I mean, you spent how many years in the Navy?
10 years.
10 years. So it was more than just your 2 or 4 year stint, right? I mean, this was something that was important to you.
Yeah, well, I tell you, I think that was my first experience. Signing up for the Navy was my first experience as a relentless reject, because when I signed up the dotted line, they give you a little bit of swag. They get you a T-shirt and a keychain. And I wore that stuff to school thinking that thinking everything was going to be awesome. And I got actually made fun of. They're like, oh, you're going to go work for the man. You're going to be part of Uncle Sam. And it wasn't cool to go serve the military growing up in Los Angeles, right? Everybody's a little rebellious, don't like authority in LA. So I persisted and I joined the Navy, and I'm, like I said, I'm so blessed to have been a part of that. But I'll tell you what, Jeremy, I'm not proud of what I did in the Navy. And I think it's what led me to where I am today, where I'm trying to serve a higher purpose. It's not about me anymore. When I was in the Navy, it was about tattoos, booze, and chasing women. It wasn't. It was about port visits. It wasn't. I worked on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. The first 2 minutes of Top Gun, that was me. Like that guy with the wands flapping, directing aircraft.
What color did you wear?
I was a yellow shirt.
Yellow shirt.
It's the greatest job. It's the perfect place for dumb jocks that have an ego. Let me tell you that right now. Like that was
there you go.
Totally me. Flashy, getting my hands dirty, and I learned a lot of things like critical thinking, all this stuff. But I wasn't thinking about any of that.
But bro, but it happened because it's part of the process. Like, and that's what I want to challenge you on. You might not be like proud of it or proud of who you were at that time or what you thought your focus was at that time. But look what came out of it. And I think that's what's important. And today, as I've gotten older, I say a lot of times with maturity comes clarity. And like, I'm a firm believer that every chapter in your story makes you who you are today. And if you want to be reborn, you can be. Mm-hmm. And you look back and focus, but all those experiences, whether good or bad, shapes who you are today. And if you didn't like your behaviors or who you are or what your focus was years ago, well, guess what? The beautiful thing is you're allowed to change that.
Absolutely.
That's the beauty of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I would challenge you and say, whether you're proud or not, you should be proud. Maybe your focus was different, but you were also a kid. You're also young. You're finding direction. You're supposed to screw up. You're supposed to make errors. It's what you do with that. And now look at you, fast forward all these years later, you're now holding yourself more accountable than ever. Mm-hmm. And it's only because you had those chapters before. That's it.
Yeah, it was a big gut check when I got out of the military. And every time it's happened, I mean, you already know. Anybody, when you find out they're a veteran, you respond with, thank you for your service.
Sure.
That was one of those things, and that's why, once again, it's led me to this path that I'm on today, is I did not feel deserving of that phrase, thank you for your service. And so now, when I get out of bed every morning, I'm like, I have to earn that title, that message. When someone says thank you to your service, I have to be proud of hearing that from somebody. I have to be willing to accept it. But the first times I heard it when I first got out of the Navy, I'm like, it's kind of like when someone calls you sir. Don't call me sir.
Right.
Don't say thank you, sir. But at the same time, the experience that I had in the Navy, I had triple stack bunk beds, right? Our only privacy was a blue curtain. Every morning, someone's dirty feet would be hanging in front of me, getting out of bed. Not a lot of people experience that. Going out on 6-8 month deployments, and your only communication with the outside world was through email at the time. There's no Wi-Fi that you can use. So, I mean, it is a sacrifice for every single person that's been in the military, whether you're on the front lines or you're on the Navy, on the ship in the Navy. You served, you sacrificed, and that's what I kind of have to remind myself. But I want to earn it every day.
Amen. Like, really well said. I mean, there's just so much to that, and I love all of it, and it truly speaks to who you are today. So, coming from the Navy, learning, all the skills and passions that you've come to find through your experiences, you get to the fire service, you end up in Colorado, right?
Yes.
What's that look like for you when you first came in? What were the expectations, and did it live up to it?
I didn't know what expectations to have. I did volunteer in Pensacola for a little while in Escambia County, and but that was completely
while you were in the Navy.
While I was in the Navy, because I had made my decision that I was going to get out and I was going to go to paramedic school.
Got it.
And so I was like, let me get my volunteer reps in so I know kind of what to walk into. But really, I walked into the culture of my department and I embraced it, and I did everything that I was supposed to do as a probationary firefighter. Make the coffee, race to the phone, wash the dishes, mop the floors. And I did all that, but really, and this isn't a diss on my department, but once you're off probation, your expectations are pretty minimal after that.
Sure.
So you're allowed to sit in the recliner. You're allowed to, banter with everybody else. You no longer have to get up early to wash the rigs. So once
complacency can creep in very quickly.
Absolutely. So once I was done probation, I was like, I've made it. Mom, I did it. I'm good. I can throw my hands, kick behind my head, kick my feet up, and I don't have any worries else in the world. But there's still something eating at me, honestly, because, and I mentioned it, the kids waving to you on their apparatus or at the grocery store, they see you as something bigger. And I knew I wasn't living up to that title. I mean, we run EMS where I'm at. And when COVID hit, our EMS calls went through the roof, like 300%. Yeah. And obviously the protocols of like sterilization and getting in all this head to toe PPE, it got to the point where I was like, okay, fires are down, EMS calls are up. I don't know if this is the fire service I want to be in. Maybe there's something else out there for me. Maybe emergency manager. Let me look into doing that, because at least I can respond to hurricanes, tornadoes, floods. I can travel around the country. That sounds appealing. Let me look into that. And at that time, it was probably 2021, 2022. There's a hurricane that hit Florida. Always. But
yeah, right.
I was a volunteer with Team Rubicon because I was a military veteran. I know a lot of veterans that volunteer with Team Rubicon. For anybody that doesn't know, they're kind of like a disaster response humanitarian aid organization. And they were sending boots on the ground out there in Florida to help muck out basements, throw tarps up on roofs, just to help the community. And I said, okay, well, this is going to be my first dive into emergency management, and I'm going to go all the way in with it. And I was signed up to go. I was a part of a wave to go in January. So it was perfect because I was able to do my vacation picks leading up to that. So I wasn't taking any sick time. I wasn't missing any time at work in the fire department. And I said, all right, let's go. But I get a phone call the week before and they said, hey, your wave's canceled. We got everything patched up here. We're good. We don't need any more additional resources. I was like, okay, well, I already have the time off. I don't know. I was stationed in Pensacola before. Let's see what's going on. Let me look up fire conferences in Florida. And there's this fire conference happening in Pensacola Beach the exact same weekend I was supposed to be at just doing the disaster response. And it was this guy that nobody knows about, Chief Isaacson. At least I didn't know who he was at the time.
Sure.
But, I asked my department because they have a budget set aside for training. And I said, hey, would you be willing to pay my registration, pay my way to get to this training? And my training chief calls me up and he goes, hey, we're going to send you to this, but just so you know, it's pretty expensive. Don't ask for anything else for the rest of the year. And I'm like, but chief, it's January.
Right. Yeah.
He's like, no, but you know what? They paid for my room on Pensacola Beach, paid for my registration, they paid for everything. I could not be so proud of my department, even though I was just about to quit. There, divine power, whatever you want to call it, something put me there for a reason. And I went there, and Chief Ike, man, he's so his passion is unapologetic. From the moment he does his countdown for you to take your getting grown men to scramble to take their seats at the beginning of a conference is already powerful enough. But doing the Pledge of Allegiance and all the instructors and the messages there, that's where I was reborn. That's where I was like, there is something bigger. The fire service and the brotherhood is bigger than what I had thought it was inside of my own organization. And all it took me was getting outside the walls of my own department to see how powerful it was. And once that happened, I said, I can't go back. I can't quit this, and I can't go back to the average mediocre firefighter. I need this. I gotta be a part of this.
It's awesome. I mean, wait, like, so here's the thing, right? That is what these conferences can do to people, right? You had to take the leap, though. You had to go try something new. You were seeking it, right? Mm-hmm. It was like you just called it, I think, divine intervention or whatever it was, right? Oh, like, you know, it was speaking to me. But you have to take that initiative to seek it out. And I think what's fun now is people have more outlets than ever to find something. So if you're feeling, I don't know, if you're feeling lost, or you feel that your environment, your zip code, your firehouse, your station, your company, your department isn't giving you everything that you think you need, there is so much opportunity today, but you have to take some type of leap. Mm-hmm. And I think it's cool. And then what happens is everybody else just gets plugged into the equation. You take the leap, and then you're either going to have people fall down on you, or you're going to have people double down on you. And that can really instill the excitement within to bring forth a born-again fireman.
Absolutely, yeah. And
it's cool.
And here's my message to anybody else that's on this same journey that may be frustrated with the fact that every time they go to a conference and then come back, and we spoke a little bit on it, like approaching it properly, you need to understand that reformation needs to happen for any kind of change. Needs to start with you. I used to be so frustrated with how my fellow firefighters in my organization used to treat me once I put that target on my back. But then I was like, you know what? Not too long ago, I was doing the exact same thing as they're doing now, and now I'm calling them out for it. Like, if anything, I'm a hypocrite. I haven't built up the credibility. I haven't established myself as that guy. I haven't built it into my own skill set. I'm just regurgitating what I learned at a conference. And then like a little kid that went and talked and sat on Santa Claus's lap, I'm like, hey, this is what I wish for Christmas. And but it has no impact. I have to put in the work. And so, like I said, I was taking it out on my fellow firefighters, but I realized that it has to start with me. This is a long game. And so for the past few years, ever since that first fire conference, and beat my head against the wall and being like, why am I getting all these arrows shot at me? Now it's every single day I show up to work, I got to hold myself to a certain standard.
Which can be hard.
Yes.
Because it's work. And like the easy way about anything is to avoid it. You said that once probation was over, you were allowed to ride the recliner. You were allowed to chill, and you've made it. And now you're holding every day you get up. Then it's like going to the gym, right? It's like eating healthy. It's like anything in life. Anything good or exciting takes work. Sometimes that's a struggle. And I think what's incredible about it is when we have to hold, understanding where accountability matters, and when you hold yourself accountable, there's going to be days that you're not accountable. Oh. And then what do you do with it? Does it eat you alive so it pushes you to get accountable again? Or do you go down that deep, dark place? And the reason, and I want to circle back, because what I said, one of the hardest things to do with a podcast is hit record. It's not the physicalness of hitting record. It's not just hitting the button and speaking. It's committing to putting yourself out there and opening yourself up to criticism, opening yourself up to your peers, putting your word and face behind your thoughts and feelings, your own experience. Not everybody's got a ton of experience. And what do you do with that? There's all of that. And so to hit record is just a mantra for me. That is for me one of the hardest things, which is everything we're talking about right now. It is hard. It is hard.
Well, I tell you one thing that, and I wore the Top Floor Tactics shirt for a reason, Jeremy. Watching how you and Mickey have conversations and just pressing record and being at a coffee shop or on the patio and just having a genuine conversation, that has helped someone like me being like, I don't have to structure this like interview style.
Yes.
I don't need a bunch of background music and all this crap. I just need to sit with like-minded individuals and have conversations and solve all the world's problems behind the mic, right?
Think about the most impressionable interactions you've had in the American Fire Service have not been captured. Oh. I talk about it all the time. I had lunch the other day with Mickey and Mike Ciampo. 3 of us just went out, had lunch, turned into like a 5-hour lunch. I had all the recording equipment with me. We were going to sit down and record. It was going to be Mike's, like literally one of Mike's first podcasts since he retired. I didn't even take the cameras out of the box, nor did I even introduce a microphone to the conversation because it was so real and authentic. I didn't want to change it. And I said to both of them, I go, do you know how many people would love to be sitting as just somebody watching this and listening to this conversation and being a part of this equation? That is what I believe pushes this job forward. It's like when you go to these conferences, when Chief Ike spoke to you at the first one you went to, when I say speak to you, he wasn't speaking specifically to you, but in that room, he's speaking to you because you're seeking it. Mm-hmm. Those moments for you are transformative. And so to understand that, for me, I have a platform now where I can share conversations, and some of the best and coolest things that I get to do or the conversations that I have every single day, I don't share. And I wish I could in some regard because I think you would get that many more people to subscribe to what really matters. But you have to be protective of that too. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's just selfish for me. And that lunch the other day was just selfish. It was friends catching up, and I didn't want to change that format at all. Mm-hmm. And so I let it sit. But there's so much to all of that. And I think that's what, I don't know, I think that's what's exciting for you with like the with the Relentless Rejects podcast, the podcast that you're doing. It holds you more accountable. It makes you have humility. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to put yourself out there, then every day when you do get up, the day that you do falter, you know you have to pick yourself back up. Listen, I have dark days quite often where I'm like, I don't want to post anything today. I don't want to record today. I don't want to do this. And there's days that I don't. Mm-hmm. And then there's days where I'm like all in. Today's an all-in day for me, and I am like banging this out. And not just this, but I did some stuff this morning, and I got quotes and emails and DMs and all these things that I have to do. It's part of the grind, but everything takes work.
Yeah, and I think two words that popped in my brain while you were just talking was one, accountability, which we've already discussed, but resiliency.
Sure. Yeah, 100%.
Right? Like you can let all this stuff beat you down. You can let the critics, you can let the editing requirements and the algorithm on social media beat you down, and you're not getting enough likes and views and all that stuff. You can be like, you know what? I'm hanging it up. I'm done. And I've talked to so many people that are also starting behind me because now I have people asking me, "Hey, bro, what platform are you using? Are you using Riverside, StreamYard? What's your lighting? What's your microphone?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I'm more than happy to tell you." But it's funny that the different levels of the journeys that we're on, like you said, you've been doing this for 5-6 years, I think, and I'm just now starting this year. I think having different levels of experience, it may resonate with someone here with me, and versus someone who resonates with you a little bit more because I'm maybe a less intimidating person to reach out to where people are like, hey, I don't, like, Jeremy's got to be busy. Corley Moore's got to be busy. I don't want to mess with those guys. Like, let me ask you these questions. And I think that's the beauty of what we're all doing is that, you know, as long as you can impact one person, doesn't have to be every day, one person here and there, that's the reason why you should keep going. It's not about you. It's about who you can help along the way.
Bro, that is exactly it, right? And I say this a lot. Like in my program, I do that whole mission over me, and I didn't create that saying. Right? You know, people have used the metaphor of the fire coat, you know, the name of the department's over your name and it's not. But there is a lot to it. And the one thing I say that I add to that is if you make the decision based upon the betterment of the department or the mission or what you have at hand, and that is weighed over your own personal gain or feelings, you'll always make the right decision. So when you make a decision or you form a decision based upon fact, that affects the organization, the outcome will always be the right decision because you're not putting yourself or inserting yourself into the equation. You have to remove yourself from it. So there are days. Why is the Instagram algorithm shitting all over me and I'm not getting my insights today? I'm not hitting numbers. Why is the podcast not being distributed the way it should have been today? Or this I thought this was a great episode. Nobody's listening to it today. Like, what are these issues? I can get so disgruntled and disparaged on everything. But then I think about, or my favorite thing is like the shit talkers. Let them talk, right? And that could be super discouraging. And I could hang it up because of that. But then all of a sudden I get one message from a kid and he's like, hey, Jeremy, I just want to let you know that I really enjoyed this podcast. And this part on this episode really spoke to me. And because of that, you get messages like that. And one positive message will erase a million negative messages. Mm-hmm. And I actually just had this conversation the other day with somebody, and I said, you can get all the hate in the world, but the hate's coming from the guys that just don't need you or want you. Mm-hmm. It's the people, you're speaking to a newer generation, a younger generation, or whoever you're targeting. That's your audience. Go talk to them. Everybody else, it's white noise. And you can't get beaten down by that, but we're all human. And of course it all takes its toll. And sometimes you do have to check out, just like the firehouse. When we talk about go home and make the fire service a lifestyle, I'm not saying you have to live it 24 hours a day. When you have your 96 off or you're a volunteer firefighter, you need to take a couple days off from the firehouse, do it. I'm not saying don't, but you can't disconnect to the point that you're not still part of it. It's a part of you. And the only way that you're going to make yourself better is if you make this a big part of your life. Find a way that it works, that you can disconnect when you need to, but I still need you connected also,
Yeah. And I don't know, speaking on the criticism and the negative comments.
Yeah.
I think there's a special thing in certain people where they actually use that to make positive results, right? Like,
sure.
Someone could say, hey, Preston, who are you? You're from a suburban fire department. Why are you running a podcast? Once again, you need to hang it up, quit your content creation. It's just stupid. I don't even know why you like it. But I use that, and I hate to say it, but I like put it up on this, like put it on my shoulder. I get a little chip on my shoulder, and I'm like, okay, let me continue doing what I'm doing, because I'm not going to stop, because I'm a relentless reject. You're going to reject what I'm doing, but I'm going to continue to be relentless because I'm finding fulfillment and passion behind this. But I'm going to use your negative comments, and I'm going to recall on those as a reminder that I need to prove you wrong, not to throw it in your face, but because of that moment when maybe 5-10 years down the road, I don't even know how long it's going to take, when that person who was bashing my platform comes across someone that says, oh, the Relentless Rejects podcast, I just listened to an episode last week. And then that guy who was just talking shit goes, oh yeah, I work with Preston. He's a good dude, man. I love what he's doing for the fire service. And I'm like,
I love that.
Yes. I don't even have to be in the room. I just have to, imagine that scenario happening. And that's what fuels my fire.
No doubt. And listen, man, I mean, I'm nobody from nowhere. When I started this thing, I was probably one of the first guys that probably navigated this space in the way that I did. And I received a ton of pushback. I still get pushback every single day. That's okay.
Yeah.
But some days it affects me. Some days it doesn't, right? But ultimately, you can't put your wins or losses on a pedestal. Gary Vee says that. He was a big part of why I started this. If you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, like, he started me in the social realm for my business long before National Fire Radio. And then that's where I saw the connection with the fire service. And we were missing here in the fire service that there was nothing happening on this end of social. And so that's where it all came from. He honestly pushed me to do it from digesting his content. Mm-hmm. And he talks about that all the time. You can't put your wins or losses on a pedestal, because if you put all your wins on a pedestal, you're going to put your losses there too. And those losses, you'll get torn down. You can't live the praise. You can't let people, if people are going to praise you, people are going to talk shit about you. Mm-hmm. So if you put your praise on a pedestal, guess what? The shit talking and the tear down is on the same pedestal, and that's going to win over the praise every single time. So you can't get lost in your own head on that stuff. Super important. And I would say that to you. And I love to hear what you said, because guys that are just starting out in this, a big part of it is your willingness to go in for the long haul. This, a podcast is not going to be successful overnight. It takes a long time. It takes a long time to curate a message, to be original, to be authentic. And that was something I have written down, and I started here on my paperwork that I love to talk about, especially with guys that start podcasts, is original thoughts. You got to be yourself. You got to form your own opinions, and as much as you can be influenced by Chief Ike and Corley Moore and all these guys that you mentioned, it really comes down to Preston Lyons' take on life and your own experience. And you can't live vicariously through these other guys and quote them all the time. And I want you to, form your own opinions, find your avenue, and create your own persona. Those guys are a part of your process, but it's got to be your process. And I say that to so many young guys that travel the circuit, go to all these conferences, they do all these things. They go, have any advice for me? I go, yeah, be yourself. Be yourself. You got 10 years in a suburban department north of Denver. You got volunteer time before that. You got 10 years in the Navy. You have so many great things that have happened to you. Take that along with all the other influences and make it your message. And that's how a podcast will survive and flourish. It's when people fall in love with the host. It's your show too. As much as you have a guest on, your community has to understand who you are and go in on you too. Because if they don't like you, they don't care who the guest is.
Well, I appreciate you saying that too, because it's taken a lot of reflection to figure out how I want to carry myself. Do I want this like crazy like intro and outro and all this stuff, and do I need a catchphrase and all this stuff? And I'm like, no, that's not really me. I'm going to be myself. And it's one of those things, like you said, it's like, I need to be authentic, and it may not be liked by everybody, but it's going to resonate with some people. And at the same time, for the people that don't agree with, like, hey, he's not FDNY, he's only got 10 years on or whatever.
That shit doesn't matter.
It doesn't. And you mentioned Gary Vee, but I use Andy Frisella, Ed Milet, a lot of those guys. Same thing. They speak on those truths. Like, if you're not yourself, people, whether they're listening or they're watching, they're going to tell you're not being authentic, and they're going to tune out.
I think one of the biggest compliments that I get, and I'm very proud to talk about it, is I am the same person right here on the podcast as I am in person. And that took me a long time to understand how important that is. You can't be two different people. People see right through that. And so you have to be engaging. I answer as many messages as I can, and I go back with emails and DMs and all that. But then when I'm out in public, I shake everybody's hand and I say hello to people if they want to have a conversation. You have to. That's the authenticity that goes into this, and you don't have a choice. And when you start to have the audacity that you think you're larger than life, or you think that you're bigger or better than you are, you lose. You lose quick. And there's plenty of those guys in the fire service that wear two hats, two personas. I've seen it. Some of the biggest names down to just regular people in your own firehouse. So it's, how do you want to conduct business? Who do you want to be? Just be the same person throughout, and that will shine through 100% of the time.
My first 5 years in the fire service, I was trying to be a people pleaser.
I get it.
I wanted to be accepted. It's one of those, that inherent characteristics of me as a kid. Like, how do I fit into this group? Like, what makes them laugh? What do they like to do on a daily basis? I'll conform to how they want to conduct themselves. And it wasn't until I stepped out of that, when I once again, reborn, I started being myself. And the weight that was lifted off of my shoulders when I'm like, I'm okay with who I am. And I'm okay with not everybody not liking me for who I am, but at least I know that I'm being true to myself. You have no idea that weight that was lifted off. Well, I'm sure you do, but
yeah, well, for sure.
Yeah.
But there's still days that I walk into my own firehouse and I'm like, am I a fraud? Like, I don't feel like doing anything here today. I don't feel like training today. I don't feel like it. And it's like, am I a fraud? And then you're like, no, I'm just real. Like, it's just real. Like, you can't be on every day. You just can't. I don't care who you are. Professional athletes down to the average person. Like, you're not going to have a top shelf day every single day, but it's trying to maintain something above the average, something good, something that is important and impactful and so on. It's all of those things. And I just think it's so important. And I don't know, man. I'm very happy for you. I mean, I'm kind of jealous. 10 years is like this perfect spot. And I can tell you that I think some of the best content you could do is put out 10-year content. Talk about the 10-year grind, 10-year struggle, the lost in the middle. Yeah. All of a sudden, 10 years, but I'm a guy with seniority on the shift today, or, it's all those things, because that's that real stuff that you can speak to because you're in that trench every single day. That content, I think the 5 to 15 year, that 10-year period in the fire service, that is a huge part of who the fire service is today. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have an incredible opportunity because you have a front row seat in that. And that is content that you can speak to directly that I think would be very well received across the board.
I appreciate you saying that because that is definitely the struggles that I have right now is I'm stepping into those acting roles, company officer, engineer.
100%.
I have the certifications. And then I was talking to a group of people in my fire department. I said, hey, we need to do like a mentorship program here because there's no like cheat code for when you sit in the right seat of like how to manage your firehouse and deal with all the different personalities and be the guy that's in charge of the training and everything that there's obviously books and certifications that you can get, but man, the dynamics are completely different. And I sat down with Rob Fisher and I'm like, how do I deal with this stuff? Because this is crazy to me. And there's the senior fireman position in my department is kind of dwindling a little bit.
Of course it is.
For whatever reason.
Absolutely.
And someone told me a couple years ago, they're like, oh, how many years you got on? I'm like, oh, 8 years. And they're like, oh, so you're a senior fireman. I'm like, no, I am not a senior fireman. They're like, bro, you're the senior fireman. I'm like, but that was another wake up call for me. I was like, okay. And I pissed off my wife with this, but I'm like, I have to go to every single outside training and conference that I can absolutely go to because I'm lacking. I'm way behind in my skill set. At least that's how I felt, and so it's a journey. And I think that is something to be shared.
But who's to say what or where you need to be where you are right now? I mean, I did an episode this morning. I got a new, I guess I'll talk about it real quick. I have a new podcast coming out on top of this one that's going to be called The Seat of the Fire. And it's basically taking, I'm not going to go into total detail yet because it's not being released for a couple weeks. So, but what it is doing is going deep diving in a short segment, 20, 30-minute segments, deep diving on something with individuals. And what's really cool about that is we were talking about actual experience does matter. And you can go and take all the training and go to all the seminars and talk to all the people in the world. But until you actually walk that fire ground, until you actually do it, you could train on it. You can educate yourself. You can be the master at door props. You could be the master at taking conferences and writing down notes and quoting people. But until you walk the fire ground and you actually go from a door prop to a real door, or you go from the fire ground throwing ladders to really throwing ladders or stretching that line and feeling that heat and bellying down into whatever it is, until you actually do it, you haven't done it. Experience does matter in this job. However, more guys than not aren't getting the experience maybe they once had. And so what do we have to do? Well, that's part of the necessary evil of the job. Mm-hmm. The job is we're going to train you and give you every tool possible so that when you do get the opportunity to do it, you do it with a great knowledge base and skill set that we've instilled in you. Now you're going to go learn the little nuances, those little things that experience teaches you over the training ground. The fire ground experience teaches you all those little nuances and small things that is what sets you up for success. And that's why we have failures on every fire call, on every fire run, and why we make mistakes. It's what you do with that. That's the experience. That part of the conversation I love, and that can only come with time.
That's extremely powerful. And the first thing that I need to convince myself of and other people is that when you say these things about experience, and, you can go to all the conferences, you can take all the notes, but until you actually do it in real life, like you don't have that credibility. You don't necessarily need to go out and teach it. But what people need to understand is that's okay if you're not there yet. You still need to be a student of the game.
That's right. 100%.
Right. And it also goes back onto what I was saying before about implementing it into your skill set. And I'll give you a short story on it. I was riding up in the right seat on the truck, a Quint, right, in my department. And we're third due and we get signed search second floor. And I had just got back from a conference where they teach searching without a hose line. And we took a water can. And I told my crew, I'm like, hey, we're going to floor 2, fire's in the basement. We're going to search. We're going to knock out a search floor 2. We did not take a hose line, and we did not train that way. And I had not trained with this crew in that way. So, as you can imagine, that was a huge failure because even though the fire was in the basement, it was very stagnant, thick, nasty smoke all the way up to the ceiling. And we get up there, and everybody falls down to their like infancy style of search. Hands and knees, shouting, just patting the wall. Nobody knows where they're at. Everybody's completely disoriented. We didn't size up the building on the outside. I didn't have a good game plan. I just said, oh, we're going in floor 2 and search, water can, let's go. And then everybody just threw everybody into the house. And I had to make the call, let's back out and get a hose line because this is not going well. And we eventually got in there and got the search done. But one of my crew members called me on that 4-day and he said, hey man, I know you made the gut instinct to pull us out and get a hose line, but I'll tell you something. If we missed a victim on that first search because we didn't have our shit together, I couldn't live with myself. And that goes to saying, what I learned at a conference doesn't mean that I can start going in on the next fire call and teaching it and making these commands. There's a process. I should have been training it and then make sure everybody's on the same page before I made that call on the fire ground. And that was a huge failure, but now it's something that, turning it into a positive, I can use that story to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
100%. I mean, it's practical experience over training ground in theory. And, you want to be a chef, you go to cooking school, you go to the culinary, you become a chef, and you come out and you got your jacket and your hat, you're ready to go. You can go cook at any restaurant. But you got to stage, you got to prep, you got to do all these things to really learn that craft so that one day you can open up that Michelin-starred restaurant, right? Or you can own your own place or be the executive chef. But it takes time to get there. And we can teach you and give you those skills. And you can go to those conferences and you can learn all these different things. But until you bring it back, digest it, implement it correctly into your own portfolio, it's not a place to be used. So it can teach you 1,000 different ways to do it. It can teach you the theory behind it. It can't teach you the actual nuances and little things that you learn when you actually go do. And that is the thing, and that's where we have an inflated confidence, where people become very confident. I've been doing this. I've taken training. I've done this. I've done that. And then they get thrusted into it, and they put themselves and get jammed up pretty quickly because, well, guess what? I can't do it yet.
Yeah, but
it's there.
That leads into another frustration of mine, and I've heard you talk with other guys about this. But
do it.
The time and energy we should be spending into training skill sets and being able to operate in an IDLH with zero visibility is interrupted by the different types of training that we have to go through, whether it's HR, like cyber assault, like training, or target solutions, and then EMS is just, for us, it's a large part of our job.
I think Sean Egan said it on my show the other day. He goes, 3 hours of fire behavior, 18 hours of hazmat.
Right. Yeah. It's I'm almost happy to just do hazmat sometimes, but some of the stuff that we do, it's like, is this really necessary for us? We don't even work in an office and we're doing cybersecurity things. And I'm like, I get it. But at the same time, we're losing, and I think this is a problem in a large part of the fire service. We're losing our identity as far as firefighters go because of the argument that fires are down, fire prevention is doing its job. But, I don't want to be that guy that relies on things that when they fail, I fail because I haven't been preparing.
I'm writing this down. I love this, losing our identity. I think that is something that does need to be explored much further. I agree with you 100% on all of this, for sure. The problem is that, how do you go back from it? There's things that have to be implemented. I think what we have to do is have the right people at the seat and at the table. And we have to look at it and be realistic upon our approach. And if we do require BS training like cybersecurity or whatever, bullying or whatever the frig you want us to take it today, right? If that's part of the curriculum and we have to do that, and that's a no option. It's a no. You have to do it. Then you got to do it. How do you implement it? How do you do it? Does it take place? Does it replace training that could better us as firefighters, right? Because we have to look at, as much as we're employees and even volunteers are employees of the district or employees of the municipality. I mean, volunteer career, it doesn't matter. You still have the same responsibilities and obligations to go through the training that you must have. And so we can't get lost in what the mission is. And I think you're right, losing our identities because we're losing the idea of what we're supposed to be doing. And I don't buy the whole fires down argument. I mean, whether it is or isn't, I don't give a shit. When a fire occurs, we have to go and we have to be proficient at our job, right? Mm-hmm. So whether I go to 100 of them a year or 20 a year, I still have to do the very same job that I would have done whether it was busier or slower. It's the same freaking job, right? So the mission can't change, even if fires are down. What we have to do is look at an organization and say, like, okay, if we have all these checkbox things that we have to do, how do we implement them so it does not affect the outcome of our companies? If we have to instill these courses and have everybody take it, every shift, every tour, every volunteer has to take this, how do we as an organization provide that to them in a way that they can do it, that it doesn't affect the outcome or replace the important stuff that is necessary for us to do our job? There's a fine balance there, for sure.
And you nailed it with the mission, but I also think that needs to be accompanied by a vision from top down, bottom up, however, which direction it needs to go. If you got a fire chief that comes to you in the firehouse, pours a cup of coffee, and he goes, "Hey, look, I don't like all this bullshit either. I don't like target solutions. I don't like all this stuff." But it's like you said, it's necessary as a municipality, as a local government entity where we're taxpayers are paying this stuff. We have to check these boxes, like you said. But if you can get the line to understand that the overall mission of the organization is to respond when we are called upon and be proficient and experts at what we are expected to do. And Scott Thompson talks about it all the time. The community expects us to be proficient at firefighting and EMS. So all that extra stuff, it still needs to get done, but the community has this expectation for us, and they get the ultimate vote on what we should be mastering in our skill set. So yeah, and implement the company officer here. The company officer needs to be controlling the firehouse, managing the time in the firehouse to make sure all these things get done. It sounds stupid and monotonous to do all this stuff, but it doesn't mean you can't knock out 30 minutes to an hour of hands-on training. It's still possible. You just got to reduce the bantering and bullshit at the kitchen table and get stuff done.
It comes to the salesmanship that we talked about earlier on in this episode, right? It's how we deliver the message, right? We can't pound our chest or we can't shove it down people's throats. It comes down to how do we package it? How do we sell it? Chief Scott Thompson is an ace. And, but many see him controversial as well. And that is the status quo, the complacency, the administrators over command staff, right? Like those people can see his ways and his thoughts and ideas as being controversial. And ultimately, yes, the public is our customer base. They are our clients, and we should be customer service forward. No doubt. The problem is that message gets lost. And as much as we pretend that is who our customer is, our administration and policymakers often forget that. The backstep firefighter doesn't care about anything other than going to fires and affecting a positive outcome, whether it's saving property or saving a life. Those backstep firefighters, that's all they want to do. That's all they want to do. And we need departments, administrators, and leaders and bosses to allow for that to happen. And that's their job. Their job is to allow that to happen. We can't lose sight of who the customer is and what the mission is all about. We just have.
Yeah, and Chief Scott Thompson, he might be controversial, but he also doesn't have a problem in recruiting either.
Oh no! Listen, I love Scott. Like, don't get me wrong. I think his message is powerful and strong. What I'm saying is the people that find him controversial are the ones that I wouldn't want to work for or ride a fire engine with. That's what I'm saying, right? And of course he's not having a problem, recruiting and hiring. It's because people want to work for great leaders, and leaders are the one. Confident and strong leaders let their people work. That's it. Everybody wants to work for a strong and confident leader, officer, chief. When it comes from the top down like that, you can fly, man. You can flourish. I get to go out and do what I love because this guy understands why I am how I am. Mm-hmm. He wants to support me and allow my company or my guys to go do their job. That's it. Just let your people work.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what I work on in the firehouse, not even on any of my platforms. It's establishing that type of culture with all the black hats in the organization. It's reminding them that, like, hey, the argument, maybe fires are down, but at the same time, like, let's get gritty. Let's get good at this shit. Let's be able to have some swagger when we're on the fire ground so we don't look like a bunch of imbeciles standing there with our New York hooks in the front yard while other people are doing work. You know what I mean? And I talk about Scott Thompson's paramedic program all the time, and that is one of the controversial things that he does. But in my department, every 6 months, we rotate from the medic unit back to an engine.
Right. How do you become proficient at one thing?
You can't, and especially as a paramedic. And granted, there are brain surgeons out there that can do both. But, every single thing that you have to learn in paramedicine, which you can actually go to prison for now if you're not properly giving medication in the right dose and administration and understand all 7 types of the body. And then also, going back over to the engine and doing extrication, hose management, building construction, all this crazy stuff. It's a high ask for guys where their only requirement is a high school diploma to get hired.
Yeah, yes to all of it. I agree with you, brother. And there's no easy answer to any of this other than going all in and believing in the process still and pushing it forward. And I think that is very much what you're doing, listening to your passion come through today as we chatted. I mean, it's there. And I wish you tremendous success with the podcast. And I think that you're on the right path. And I'm excited to watch it go. And I'm always watching and curating and seeing who's doing what. I just love it. And when I see guys out there for the right reasons, I want to be a part of it. So I'm glad we were able to get together today to chat it up, man. This is great.
I'm happy too. And I appreciate everything that you've done with your platform because it's helped guide people like me to figure out how to navigate this space, other than looking at Joe Rogan podcast. But you've been pretty successful. You have amazing people on your platform. And once again, I'm honored to be on here. But, thanks for leading the way in this space.
It's very, very kind, man. I appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun. I didn't know what this was going to look like when I started this crazy little thing. And there's been a lot of peaks and valleys, just like life, just like the firehouse, Yeah. But ultimately, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't enjoy it. And what I get to do today is to meet a new brother, a new friend, and to, hear his passion, which renews mine. And, and I think that's what this is all about. I think that anybody that's willing to put themselves out there for the mission, for the fire service, to make this better, you're a winner in my book, man. I'm in on that. So, I wish you tremendous success with the show and what you're doing. And I would just say, keep going, man. It's a long game. You got a long way to go, but brother, it's a fun ride. It's a fun ride.
I appreciate it. And there's one last thing. Now that we've actually got to talk face to face, you wore a hat that said "Support your local firefighter podcast." I gotta figure out how to get that.
That's a one of one.
All right.
That was an FDIC this year. That was made for me through Tony, who just did. Hang on, let me get into my phone real quick.
While you're doing that, I am going to say that maybe I can convince you in the raffling that off at FDIC next year because you had to give up your jersey, right?
So that is that's a fun conversation. God, hang on. Let me do one thing at a time here because I'm searching in my phone right now.
What? Yeah, I'm just going to talk to the crowd while you're going, brother.
No, go ahead. Go.
Yeah, dude. For anybody that is interested in figuring out how to navigate, putting themselves out there, and doing it the right way, because there's a lot of other platforms out there that I've seen, especially like on Instagram and stuff, is that they're putting very extreme posts out there, exposing other like people in the fire service, and even though they get you a lot of likes and clicks, make sure you're very careful on the content you're putting out when you first start off, because you are going to catch some arrows, and you're going to probably burn a bridge here or there, and one day you're going to try to mend those relationships, and the stuff that you put out could rub people the wrong way for a long time. So.
Yeah, good words, man. Good words. Tony Bratcher from the Kitchen Table Podcast. I had him on the show a couple months ago, and I met him out in FDIC this year, and along with the guys from Axe Head Threads. Axe Head Threads are just a great bunch of dudes that had they're always at FDIC every year. They do incredible embroidery and stuff. So they have the hats, support your local engine company, truck company, all those things. And then Tony had one of those hats, and I was like, bro, I want one of those. And he said, these are special. He goes, they're one-offs. And then he surprised me with one with NFR on the side of it, which was very cool. So it was a gift, and I'm super grateful for it, and I wear it often. But who knows? Maybe you'll get one of these days. We'll get you one for sure, man.
I'll put it on my vision board.
Yeah, the vision board. Get out of here. Good Lord. I love it, man. Well, listen, Preston Lyons, thank you, brother. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today. Where can people find the show? How do they reach out to you? Where are you? Give them all the juice.
So Relentless Rejects is on pretty much all major podcasts, Spotify, iTunes. I even have it on YouTube, so if you wanted to watch the video, Spotify will have the video version of it as well. If you wanted to reach out to me, probably the best way to do it is through Instagram on Relentless Rejects. My email also lionspw501@gmail.com. If you got any questions, some insights on starting a podcast or content creation or firemanship, whatever it is, reach out.
I love it, man. Well, I wish you continued success as you find your voice and find your place. I freaking love it, man. You're doing great things, and thanks for taking some time today, joining me, and sharing a little bit of your story, man.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. Stay right here. I'm going to sign off the podcast. I'll come right back to you, okay? Cool. Guys, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. Do me a favor. Like I say at the end of every episode, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse, and talk about it. Because when we talk about the job, we're making the job better. We'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio.
National Fire Radio.